Well, good morning, everybody. So glad that you're here. If you're standing at the back and you're wondering if there's a few more seats, you got to come all the way down to the front. So glad that you're here with us this morning. It's going to be a great day. It already has been a great day, and thank you to Noel and the worship team for leading us this morning. Well, it is Easter Sunday, and as you've already heard from the stage here this morning, some people think this is the most important day in the whole year to celebrate something so significant as the rising of Jesus from the dead. Other people don't distinguish this day from another day. With Good Friday just passed, this is also a long weekend, and so for some of you, this might be a great long weekend. You might be with us visiting family or staying with friends for the weekend. No matter the situation, we welcome you no matter who you are. We welcome you no matter what you believe. We welcome you no matter what you know. You are welcome here this morning. As we like to say around here, we're a no previous experience required church. So you're going to have a good time with us this morning. Our hope is that we will challenge you this morning and we will inspire you to think and to act more along the lines of what the Christian life is all about for you. Want to let you know that our new teaching pastor that was affirmed last week, Mark Gagnon, is going to be starting with us next week, and we're excited for that, so really encourage you to keep coming back to Lakeside. It's going to be amazing times down the road. So this morning I'm going to ask your help and your participation with me. In case I get off track this morning, I want you to remember what the message is about. The message is about this word, life. The message is about life this morning. I want you to remember that. You say, what is this guy talking about? I'm talking about life. And so when I ask you the question this morning, because I'm going to be checking up on you to make sure that you don't get off track, when I ask you the question, what are we talking about this morning? I want to hear it. What are we talking about this morning? Life. Okay, we're talking about life. Good. Well, this is how we're going to talk about it as I smack my hand on the table. We're going to look at the historical accounts of the life of Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus. And in those accounts, there is a key to life. We're going to discover that this morning. Now, when I was a little bit younger, I had some ideas about life. And maybe you're thinking back and you're saying, yeah, I did too. I had some ideas about how my life would turn out. One of them was inspired, as I think back. I think it was possibly inspired by an old TV show, Grizzly Adams. Now, if you remember that, you are certifiably, old. Because that show ran between 1977 and 1978. Grizzly Adams lived up in the mountains, and he was this guy who had escaped after having been accused of a crime he did not commit, and he developed a friendship with a bear cub named Ben. And if you're sitting there thinking, okay, I'm not as old as 1977, you're thinking to yourself, what a lame plot. And it pretty much was, but it was the best thing we had at the time. So I had the idea back then that one day in the future, I'd live in the far north. I'd live in a cabin where food would have to be airlifted in, maybe something along the lines of Grizzly Adams. I'd hunt and fish and live off the land and have 10 children. And look at me now. And I remember the day when I shared that dream with Andrea. Not happening. Not happening. I remember another dream that I had. During my university years, I was a young follower of Jesus in those days, and I was inspired reading the stories of missionaries who had gone to parts unknown around the world. One of my favorites was the story of a man named Adoniram Judson, the first missionary to leave the U.S. for foreign work in 1812. He traveled to Burma, where at the time there was not one known Christian in the entire country. Disease was rampant. Foreigners were virtually unknown in the country. Adoniram survived 3 wives, the death of several of his children, and long stints imprisoned for his faith in Burma. Sometime after his death, government officials reckoned that there were some 210,000 Christians in the country, and they traced it back to the work that Adoniram Judson had begun there years earlier. And I thought, yeah, I want to live in parts unknown like that. I want to live a life like that. And although I have done plenty of international mission work over the course of my life, things didn't quite turn out that way either. And I'm asking you this morning, what about you? Are there some dreams that you thought how your life would turn out and it didn't quite work out that way? I'm wondering if there's any people in the room here this morning who earlier in their life they thought they'd make it to the NHL. Maybe they thought they'd make a great political career, some other dream that didn't quite work out that way. My first practical observation this morning, and that's part of my style when I speak, is just make some simple observations and apply them to our lives this morning. But you ever notice that sometimes your expectations don't match with reality? Mismatched expectations can sometimes be a good thing, because sometimes things turn out unexpectedly better than you anticipated. The project turns out even better, even though you had your doubts about it. The work turns out better. Things just turned in a better direction. But sometimes wrong expectations can take you to a place of suffering and pain, disillusionment. Much more serious things than that about whether we made the NHL or whether we became a great political leader or some other dream. Things turn out much more difficult for us when we have wrong expectations. And after Jesus' death on the cross, just 3 days earlier, a couple of Jesus' closest friends discovered that their expectations no longer matched reality either. And that's what we're going to begin looking at this morning. And the New Testament of the Bible contains 4 eyewitness accounts, what I like to call them, eyewitness accounts of the life of Jesus. They're named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John after their authors. They gave eyewitness accounts that all are slightly different from each other, but still tell the same story. And we're going to collect insights from all of them this morning, but we are going to focus on Luke's account of the resurrection. And because we're a no experience required church, you don't have to have a Bible to follow along, although you're welcome to do so. All the key points will be on the screen, and we're just going to begin jumping in. We're going to follow through what happened, make some observations to our lives this morning. Well, let's start with the account in Luke chapter 24. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. Let's just stop for a moment there. Mark's account of this same moment identifies that there were 3 different women in the group, specifically by name: Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome. And they are found in other parts of the scriptures to have been part of that early crowd of people that followed Jesus. So these women went to the tomb that morning. Spices were used to control the odor of a decomposing body. And they knew that Jesus, having been put in the tomb 3 days early, would have already begun that process. And their bringing of spices to the tomb was an act meant to honor the body and life of Jesus. When they got there, let's see what happened. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. They were so flummoxed by this, so bewildered. One of the accounts has one of the women encountering the risen Jesus in this moment, and she thinks he's the gardener taking care of the tomb, and she says, "Where have you taken his body? Would you please let me know, because I can go and get it and bring his body back." She didn't recognize Jesus, being so bewildered by this moment. And that's why Luke says, while they were wondering about this, what is going on? Because my expectation was to come to the tomb and find a dead body. And that's our second practical observation of the morning. Just simply to say, the women didn't expect to find an empty tomb. They expected to find a dead body. And what's really interesting about this is we step back a short while earlier in the eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life, and we find out that Jesus had predicted that all of this would happen. Let's check it out. We go back a few chapters to Luke chapter 18. It says, Jesus took the 12 aside and told them, "We're going up to Jerusalem, and everything that is written by the prophets about the Son of Man will be fulfilled. He'll be handed over to the Gentiles. They will mock him, insult him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him. On the 3rd day, he will rise again." Just stop there for a second. That sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Sounds pretty, on the face of it, something you could understand. But look at the disciples' reaction. The disciples did not understand any of this. Its meaning was hidden from them, and they did not know what he was talking about. Now, why is that? Maybe the disciples thought to themselves, perhaps Jesus has had a little bit too much Middle Eastern desert sun, and he's a little bit delusional about what's going to happen in the future, because after all, the disciples had begun to conclude, this is really the Messiah that is walking among us. He's the chosen one sent to rescue the nation of Israel from the hand of its oppressors. Certainly, he could not be mocked, spit upon, flogged, beaten, and killed. That will never happen, because how could a dead person rescue and redeem Israel? So they thought perhaps Jesus has had too much sun today. They thought he really didn't know what he was talking about. And this, again, goes back to these expectations that Jesus would be the triumphant, conquering Messiah, not the suffering servant Messiah. Another eyewitness account records this same lack of understanding of what was about to happen to the Messiah. This one happens to Peter, and it's in Matthew's recounting of the facts. He says something very similar to what we just looked at. Here's Peter's reaction. Check this out. He says, "Never, Lord." He said, "This shall never happen to you." Now remember, what are we talking about today? I almost caught you napping there. We're talking about life today, and I got a personal question for you. Does anybody here find that life isn't as straightforward as you'd like it to be? It's a little bit confusing sometimes. And I know some of us here are pretty smart. You might even use the phrase, as I do sometimes, when I say, I know I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. Still, life isn't easy. And here's where the story gets really interesting, and it's where I want to camp out and build the rest of our message around this morning. It's our key verse and key idea of the day, and we're back to Luke chapter 24. Picking up the story, while they were wondering about this, suddenly two men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down, their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He's not here, he is risen." Then they remembered his words. Sometimes our perspective gets so off, so out in left field, that we actually need a visit from God. We actually need an angelic visitor, if you're following the metaphor as I'm using it here this morning. We need an angelic encounter to shatter our understanding. And maybe you're here this morning and you think, I've got all of this figured out. I've taken my religion classes. I maybe even have picked up a Bible or maybe even studied the Bible. I know all about this. I know what God does. I know the Easter story. I know the Christmas story. You've got it all figured out. But you put it all in a box. You put Jesus in a box, and it really doesn't impact your life in any meaningful way. Maybe this morning, you need an encounter with God where he shatters your understanding and says to you, why do you look for the living among the dead? He's not here. He has risen. So what are we talking about this morning? We're talking about life, and Jesus came to give life. He came to take off the shackles of shame. He came to break the bondage of brokenness and make us brand new. He came to make dead things alive, lost things found, cursed things free, sick things well, and dark things light. And I want to suggest to you this morning that you can have, and we can have, that kind of life. But we're not going to find it if we look for it in dead places. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? So let's just begin to unpack this a little bit. Let's look at life. Let's look at what life looks like. And I put the word in brackets there, victory. And there's a reason for that. I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes later in the message. But if we think about life, we could write a lot of words up on the screen about life. When we think about this kind of life that Jesus came to give us, we might think of words like these. We might think about happiness. Yeah, I'll be having life. My life will be meaningful when I'm happy, when I have the opposite of sadness, when my life is genuinely happy, that's going to be good. When I have stability, when my life has a sense of being grounded and not just being shook up all the time. When I experience freedom, I want to let you know that starting next Sunday, we're going to start a 3-week series all about freedom. Week 1 is going to be freedom from. What does God really free us from? Week 2 is freedom for. What does God free us for? And what does God free us for is week 3 and week 2. Sorry, I got that confused. Freedom from, freedom to, freedom for. When my life has freedom, I might say that's a sense of a successful life. When I experience life-giving relationships as opposed to life-sucking relationships, that's going to be great. My life is going to be meaningful. When I experience peace in the storm, storms come to every life, and when I can experience a sense of peace in those, that is true life. Truth, when my life is characterized by truth and not lies. When I live in a sense of the truth, I know what's true and I live it out. That's life. To love and to be loved, that is life. And what's wrong with any of those things? Nothing is wrong with any of those things. Those are some of the components that give our life meaning, that really we say, that is life. That's what I'm chasing after. What I want to bring to your attention this morning is this question that the angelic visitors asked to the women at the tomb. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? So let's just change gears a little bit. And let's say, where might we go looking for those life things that we just talked about on that list? Sadly, sometimes we go looking among the dead for them. I want to just go through a list here and make some comments about this list. These are some of the dead places that we go looking for life. There's nothing wrong with anything on this list, but sometimes we go looking for life here. We go looking for life in a sense of job. Yeah, I have a great job. That's what really gives my life meaning, this great, incredible job. I'm well paid. The work is challenging. I like the people that I work with, and I find life in my job. I find a sense of life in the assets that I own, in the bank accounts that I control, and the sense of financial excellence that I have. That's where life is found. When I'm doing well materially and financially, that's going to bring a sense of life to me. The businesses that I own or the businesses that I'm involved in, those are the kinds of things that bring me life. The challenges that I overcome in business day by day. And some of you might be saying, yeah, that does give a certain measure of challenge, a certain measure of life. The power that I can exercise in my life, a sense of, I'm a person of power, and maybe you are a person who has employees that report to you, or students in a classroom if you're a teacher, and that sense of power can sometimes bring a sense of life to us. Maybe it's in the experiences you have. I remember one time my wife and I were with another couple, and they said, yeah, life is all about the experiences. You have trips, you have relationships, you have places you go, you have things you do. It's all in the experiences of life. Sometimes we go looking for life in the habits and old ways of thinking. This is what I've always done before. This is what I've always believed, in a sense of life that we look for in those. And sometimes we experience relationships without substance. Sometimes we wonder why life isn't found there. All of these things are the dead places. These are the places we go looking for life. And what God says to us this morning on this Resurrection Sunday, on this Easter Sunday, is I have an upside-down way of looking at things. The world tells you that these things will bring happiness, but I want to tell you that there's a new place, a place of life, and the message is, it's not here. He has risen. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? And so practical application number 4 this morning is that you can't find life in dead places. Well, if we can't find it there, then where can we find it? We're going to pick up our story in Matthew chapter 20. We're going to pick it up in Matthew's account. These same angelic visitors visit the women at the tomb, and each of these eyewitness accounts gives you slightly more color and description than the other one. And they say, go quickly and tell his disciples, he's risen from the dead, and he's going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now, Galilee is a little more than 100 kilometers from Jerusalem. By walking, it's said to be about 18 hours walk. And Jesus and his followers made this trip back and forth from Galilee to Jerusalem a number of times in the course of Jesus' life. Galilee was the place where the majority of Jesus' ministry took place. When you read the eyewitness accounts of the life of Jesus, he did this, he crossed the lake, he walked on the water, there was the miraculous catch of fish, there was the feeding of 5,000. If any of these stories sound familiar to them, they all took place up there in the Galilee region, in towns and around that lake. And God says to us this morning, if you want life, you're going to have to go to Galilee for it. You're going to have to walk 18 hours for it. And I'm stretching the metaphor here a little bit, but I hope you'll follow with me. If we want life, we can't find it in dead places. We got to go to Galilee. So let's talk a little bit about what Galilee looks like. What was Galilee for the disciples? What did it represent? I've got 5 things that I want to talk about here this morning. It was a place of relationship. It was a place of relationship. This is where an encounter between Peter and Jesus took place, where Jesus said to him, "Follow me. I'm going to make you a fisher of men, not just a fisher of fish." This was a place of relationship where the disciples first learned to follow, and other early followers learned to follow. And in Galilee, that's where we begin a relationship with Jesus. And so if you want to walk to Galilee this morning, you want to walk into a relationship with Jesus. Galilee is also a place of trust. That's where walking on the water took place. Where Peter said to Jesus, if it's really you, ask me to walk on the water to you. And Jesus said, just go ahead, step out, walk on the water. This was where it was a place of trust. It's a place of relationship, a place of trust. It's also a place of miracles. A place of miracles. And the Bible is filled with all kinds of miraculous stories. I love the stories about healings. Sick people who had been sick for years and years, some of them, unable to find relief through any other means. And Jesus comes along and in methods that blow your mind, healed people with all kinds of ailments. He also raised people from the dead. One of my favorites is the story of Lazarus in the tomb, where he'd already been there 4 days, and he said, "Come out, Lazarus." It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Galilee is a place of miracles. Galilee is also a place of vision and teaching. That's a place where Jesus would pull the disciples aside to learn for a little while. It's also the place where he delivered the Sermon on the Mount and told some of those unforgettable ideas to his early followers and listeners. And lastly, Galilee is a place of mission. From there, Jesus often sent his early followers out to preach from one town and one village to the next and tell them that the kingdom of God was among them and that people should believe. So if we want life this morning, we're going to have to find it in Galilee, a place of relationship, of trust, of miracles, a place of vision and teaching, a place of mission. And when we speak about mission, it was when the disciples went to Galilee a few days later and met with the risen Jesus there, where Jesus delivered something that people often call the Great Commission. Here's how it reads. Jesus said to his followers, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age." And through this part of the Bible, we recognize that God had a mission for those early followers, and he has a mission for us too, and you'll find it in Galilee. In other words, you're going to find it in a relationship with God and discovering more of what he has for you, who he is for you, and how he wants you to live your life, that we will stop looking in dead places for life. We'll find it in a relationship with him. I love the way our new teaching pastor last week, Mark Gagnon, said this in a different way. He said, "God, what are you doing today, and how can I join you in it?" And when I encourage you to go to Galilee this morning, I'm really saying the same thing in different words. And the Bible paints a robust picture of what life is really meant to be. We're talking about life this morning. Here are some of the ways that the Bible paints life. A branch connected to a vine. A child connected to a father. Forgiveness that knows no bounds. Eternal life. There are many more descriptions of life. As we start to wrap up our message this morning, I want to give you one of the most powerful descriptions of life that we find in the Bible, and it's found at the extreme end of the Bible in the book of Revelation. And the book of Revelation is a book that talks about things yet to come in the future. And yet to come is this description. I'm going to read it off the screen for you and make a couple of comments. These are they who have come out of the great tribulation. They've washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. And therefore they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. Never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. And this is one of the most compelling pictures of life that I have found in the Bible. Let's just look at some of those phrases. Just go back a little bit. He says we'll be sheltered by God's presence. God will erect a perimeter around your life, and he will shelter you in a way that nothing in this life can. God will allow you to never be hungry. He doesn't mean that you're not going to be hungry for your next meal, but the sense that your desires will be filled with him, that you'll never be thirsty. Sometimes we can get that punishing headache of dehydration from being literally thirsty for water. But in this sense, I like to think of it as God quenching my thirst in a way that a glass of water could never do, and preventing that sense of dehydration that a life apart from God creates. That you'll never be burned. I don't think it literally means that you won't get a sunburn. I think what God is trying to say is that I will protect you from the elements of this life. I'll protect you from the natural elements and those things that come your way. And he says at the end of that, the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water. That's really a sense of himself satisfying us. He is the living water for our lives. He is the one that really gives us life. And we're talking about life this morning and the life that he brings. And some of us here this morning, you might have come and you're saying to yourself, I think I'm in need of a personal resurrection. I feel a little bit dead. I feel like I need something, and that's why I've come this morning. You have come to the right place because God offers that to you. He offers that sense of personal resurrection to bring you back to life, to bring your life into a new place of vibrancy, to satisfy you with himself, the living water. And I ask you this morning, can you get excited about that? That is something that is worth getting excited about. And as we wrap up our Easter service this morning, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to sing. I'm going to ask you to stand in a moment. We're going to sing a medley of 2 songs. And the first one is a song called Resurrecting. And it's a huge song, like 7 minutes long, but we're only going to sing a part of it. And then we're going to sing a part of another song. But I want to just put the words on the screen for the song Resurrecting, because I just love that it talks about what we're talking about this morning. When God says to us, why do you look for the living among the dead? Check these words out. By your Spirit, I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. And in your name, I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. Do you need that this morning? Are you ready for a little bit of resurrecting to take place in your life? Let me read that one more time. And as I do, would you stand with me? And then let's just have you learn this song with the band. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your Spirit, I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name, I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. Let's sing together.
By your Spirit, I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected
where soldiers watched in vain, was borrowed for 3 days. His body there would not remain. Our God has robbed the grave.
Our God has robbed the
and the life, and the one who believes in him will live even though they die. You are an overcomer because of Jesus. Thank you for being here this morning. Happy Easter. Have a wonderful day with your family, friends, and we will see you here next week when we launch Freedom.